My father gave my son a rock inside an iPhone box on his 8th birthday and said, "Only good boys get toys." Laughter followed, soft, uncomfortable, complicit. Except mine. Knox just stared at the stone, silent. He didn't cry. He didn't ask why. But I knew that look. I had worn it before. Same room. Same game. Same man. And this time, something in me cracked. This isn't just a story about a birthday gone wrong. It's about what happens when silence finally breaks. Stay. You need to hear this. The living room of the Wilder house was dressed for celebration. Soft yellow light spilled from vintage sconces, casting a golden warmth across framed family photos and handmade decorations. A banner hung crookedly over the fireplace. "Happy 8th birthday, Knox." Balloons bounced against the ceiling with every shift of air. The scent of buttercream, cinnamon candles, and something faintly leathery, Victor's cologne, mingled in the air. Knox Wilder sat cross-legged on the floor, his cheeks pink with excitement. He had been counting down to this moment for weeks. He was the kind of kid who remembered to say "excuse me" even when interrupting his own birthday party. Bright, curious, polite to a fault. Jude stood by the kitchen doorway, watching his son with a quiet smile, arms crossed. 37 years old, calm, observant, thoughtful. The kind of father who listened more than he spoke. The kind who knew the weight behind every glance in this house. The last present was placed on the floor in front of Knox. A white box. Clean edges. The unmistakable glint of the Apple logo on the top. Knox's eyes widened. Is that an iPhone?" he whispered. The room hushed for a beat. Even Elaine, his grandmother, Jude's mother, tilted her head in surprise. Victor Wilder chuckled. He stood with perfect posture behind his cane, though he didn't seem to need it much. 66, sharp-eyed, always overdressed in his usual cardigan and slacks, like he was one lecture away from running a courtroom. "Go ahead, champ," Victor said, his voice smooth, controlled. "Open it. You've been such a good boy this year, haven't you?" Jude's eyes flicked toward his father. He didn't say a word. But his spine had straightened, just slightly. Knox reached for the box with careful hands, as if it might disappear if he moved too quickly. He lifted the lid, holding his breath. Then he stopped. There was no device inside. No charger. No instructions. Just a rock. A dull, misshapen, rough-edged rock. Faintly chalky, as if plucked from some construction site, and dropped into the velvet-lined box as an afterthought. The boy blinked. He looked up, confused. Victor leaned down, his voice low but sharp as glass. "Only good boys get toys." Laughter. Not explosive. Not mean on the surface. But it bubbled up around the room like champagne fizz, careless, dismissive, safe. Emily, Jude's younger sister, stifled a laugh into her wine glass. Jason, her husband, actually clapped once. "Classic, Frank," he said. "You got him good." Elaine shook her head with a breathy chuckle, the kind mothers use when they know better but pretend not to. Jude didn't laugh. He hadn't moved. Knox stared at the rock in his palm. He didn't say anything. His face didn't twist or crumple. No tears. Just stillness. A quiet kind of hurt. Like something in him had been quietly switched off. And that was what made Jude's stomach clench. Because he'd seen that look before. Years ago. Same room. Different box. A moment that had shaped the rest of his life. The laughter in the room faded into background noise. The music kicked in again, Bobby Darin, upbeat and wrong. Someone called for cake. Plates clinked. But Jude stayed frozen. He looked at his son holding that rock like it was some ancient relic he didn't know what to do with. And suddenly, the warm little living room felt like a courtroom. And Victor Wilder was still the judge. But this time, Jude wasn't going to let the verdict stand. Jude stood still in the kitchen doorway, the sound of party chatter muffled like it was coming from underwater. The laughter. The rock. Knox's frozen expression. It all cracked something open. A memory, sharp and sudden, slammed into him. Christmas, 1991. He was 10. Snow pressed against the window panes of this very house. The tree sparkled with ornaments, most of them bought by his mother. A fire popped in the hearth. The room was warm, festive, deceptive. Young Jude sat on the floor in his footed pajamas, hands trembling slightly as he reached for the large box wrapped in deep red paper. It had his name on it. Bold, black ink. Jude. He remembered looking up, catching his father's gaze. Victor had nodded once. Jude tore the paper open, heart racing, only to reveal a plastic pink lunchbox, covered in cartoon bunnies. He blinked. Silence. Then Victor's voice, smooth and precise. You said you wanted to pack your own lunches like a big boy. Don't be picky about the packaging. Emily had burst into giggles beside him. It's a girl's box, Jude. Victor added, casually, maybe next year you'll be man enough to handle a real gift. Elaine had looked down at her lap. No one defended him. No one ever defended him. Back to now. Jude's knuckles turned white around the edge of the kitchen counter. His breath caught in his throat. Victor's voice echoed in his skull like a bad radio signal. You're too sensitive. Be a man. You think life's gonna hand you trophies for being polite. And the worst one. Someday, you'll thank me. Jude swallowed hard. His son was out there, fingers wrapped around a stupid, meaningless rock, and for a moment, just a moment, Jude had seen his younger self in Knox's eyes. That same flash of confusion. That same instinct to not make a scene. He closed his eyes. Another memory surged. Thanksgiving, 1995. He was 14. He had won second place in the county science fair. He'd built a model of a hydroelectric dam, using old fish tank parts and tiny working turbines. He came home, proud. Beaming. Victor didn't even look up from his paper. Second place. He muttered. So. Someone else worked harder. Jude had stood there, holding the ribbon like it meant something. No trophy? Victor asked without a flicker of emotion. No photos? Then what are you smiling for? The sound of forks hitting cake plates brought him back. Jude stared across the room. Victor was now cutting a slice of cake like nothing had happened. Emily was whispering something to Jason, laughing under her breath. Elaine was refilling wine glasses. And Knox was sitting alone on the floor, still holding that rock. It stops here, Jude muttered under his breath. His voice was low. But it was the kind of low that came from somewhere deep. Somewhere scorched. He stepped forward, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. Not fast. Not panicked. But steady. Heavy. Because this wasn't just about Knox anymore. It was about every birthday, every holiday, every moment Victor had poisoned with shame disguised as tough love. Jude wasn't 10 anymore. And his son wasn't going to grow up believing this was normal. Jude's footsteps echoed against the hardwood floor like distant thunder. He walked slowly toward the center of the living room, where the laughter had started to thin. The air shifted, subtle at first, like the moment before a storm hits. Victor, still standing near the cake, was mid-sentence when he noticed the silence spreading like a stain behind him. He turned. "Something on your mind, son?" he asked, casually, slicing into a piece of chocolate cake like this was just another Sunday dinner. Jude stopped 2 feet away. "Yeah," he said, voice level. "That rock." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on. It was a joke. Lighten up. Knox is not crying, is he?" He smirked. "He's tougher than you were." Jude exhaled slowly, but the fury in his chest was coiled, deliberate. "You think that was funny?" he asked, louder now. "You think humiliating an 8-year-old is a punchline?" A hush fell over the room. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Emily froze, mid-sip of wine. Elaine's eyes darted from Jude to Victor and back again, already pleading silently for him not to ruin the evening. But Jude didn't stop. He stepped forward. "You've been doing this for as long as I can remember." Victor chuckled once, dismissively. "Doing what?" "Raising you. Teaching you to grow a spine." "No," Jude shot back. "Cutting people down. Using sarcasm as a weapon. Calling it tough love when it's just plain cruelty." He looked around the room. No one met his eyes. "You humiliate people to stay in control. You tear them down so you can feel taller." Victor's smile faltered. "Careful, Jude." "Why?" Jude snapped. "Because I might say something real for once." He took another step closer. "You're not a strong man, Dad. You're not wise. You're just a coward in a cardigan, slinging insults instead of showing up for the people who needed you." A long beat. No one breathed. Even the hum of the refrigerator in the next room seemed to die out. Knox sat quietly on the rug, rock still in his lap, watching his father with wide eyes. Victor stared at Jude. His lips parted like he might say something. But nothing came out. The room was utterly, unnervingly still. Jason looked down. Emily blinked rapidly. Elaine's mouth opened halfway, then closed again. No one dared speak. Because in that moment, it wasn't just a son confronting his father. It was history unraveling. The silence held, thick and suffocating, until Jude reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped black box. He held it up. "You want to know the real punchline?" His voice was calm now. Sharper. "I see. This is the real gift. The iPhone Knox actually deserves." Gasps stirred like a ripple across a still lake. Elaine's hand flew to her chest. Emily leaned forward slightly. Jude didn't look away from his father. "I bought it 2 weeks ago. Had it engraved with his name. Set up with all the apps he loves. I even made a playlist of bedtime songs he likes." He turned slightly toward the group. "But I didn't give it to him yet. Because I thought, maybe, just maybe, you'd show him the decency you never showed me." He dropped the gift box onto the table with a soft thud. Victor stared at it, but said nothing. Jude let the silence settle, just long enough to sting. Then he pulled out a manila folder, thick and creased at the edges. "You think I'm done?" he said quietly. "I'm just getting started." He opened the folder and began laying out sheets of paper on the coffee table like cards in a game no one else wanted to play. "Emily," Jude said without even looking at her, "how was Tulum?" Emily stiffened. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jude picked up a document and held it high. Wire transfer receipt. $6,200 pulled from Knox's college fund. Labeled under educational expenses. You bought plane tickets, hotel, and a goddamn underwater photo shoot. Jason blinked. Wait, what? Shut up, Jason. Emily's voice cracked. That was supposed to be temporary. I was going to pay it back. Jude turned sharply. With what? Your Etsy store that hasn't shipped a product in 8 months. She flushed red, furious and exposed. Mom said it was okay. She said. No, Mom said Victor handles the accounts, Jude snapped. And he did. Which brings me to the real kicker. He picked up a final sheet, printed in grayscale, clipped to a fraud report. Dad, Jude said, voice low, you opened 2 credit cards in Knox's name. Using his social security number. One of them's maxed. The other's in collections. His 8. Elaine gasped audibly. Her wine glass tipped slightly, spilling red down her blouse. That's not possible, she whispered. Victor, tell him that's not true. But Victor didn't speak. Jude slapped the printout down on the coffee table. I have credit reports. Fraud notices. Letters from the bank. I even called the companies and recorded the calls. You used my son to fund your debt. To buy cigars, steaks, and a golf weekend in Arizona. You remember that? The one you said was a business retreat. Victor's face had gone gray. Like ash. That's not how it. Don't. Jude's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare lie in front of him. He pointed toward Knox, who was now clutching the real gift box in his lap, watching silently, breath shallow. Nobody moved. Jason slowly stood up. I didn't know any of this, he mumbled. Jesus, man. Emily's lip trembled. Elaine had gone completely still, her hands shaking in her lap. Victor finally tried to speak. Jude, I did what I had to do. Families help each other. You wouldn't understand. No, Jude snapped, stepping closer. You don't get to stand behind family, after everything you've done to it. He swept a hand toward the table full of evidence. This is who you are, Dad. Not the wise man with the lectures. Not the tough love patriarch. Just a scared, bitter man hiding behind smirks and stories. And now everyone sees it. The weight of the truth hung over the room like smoke after a fire. No one spoke. No one defended him. Not this time. The king had no clothes. And everyone was finally looking. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. No one moved. No one dared. Jude straightened his back, slow and deliberate. His hand hovered over the pile of documents on the table, then calmly gathered each page and slipped them back into the folder. The sound of paper brushing paper echoed in the stillness like thunder. Effective immediately, Jude said, eyes locked on his father, you're done. Victor blinked. Done with what? Everything. Jude's voice was steel. I've revoked your power of attorney. You no longer have access to Knox's education fund, trust, or insurance. I've already moved the remaining money into a new account, one you'll never touch again. Elaine gasped. Jude, you don't need to. He turned to her, voice unwavering. He used my son's name to open credit cards, Mom. He stole from him. Lied to all of us. If you're not furious, you're complicit. She fell silent. Jude's phone was already in his hand. He scrolled, tapped. I've just texted my attorney, he continued. Tomorrow morning, the bank will receive copies of everything. The fraud department will open a full investigation. Victor stepped forward, face pale, mouth slightly open. You don't understand, this'll ruin me, Jude. Jude looked at him flatly. You did that yourself. We're family. You used that word like a shield. I'm done hiding behind it. He hit another contact. I've filed a report with the police, and one with Child Protective Services. They'll see the financial abuse. The identity theft. I'm done letting you gamble with anyone else's future. Emily stood up sharply, knocking over her wine glass. You're gonna destroy this family, Jude. He cut her off without looking. You already did when you stole from a child to sip cocktails in Tulum. Jason muttered something unintelligible, wide-eyed, backing away from the drama like a man trying to escape a fire he helped start. Jude turned to Knox. The boy had quietly risen from the rug, holding the black box in his small hands. His eyes flicked from Victor to Jude, then back again. He didn't speak, just watched, soaking everything in. Jude crouched down in front of him. Come on, bud, he said softly. Let's get out of here. Knox looked up at him, voice barely a whisper. Are we in trouble? Jude smiled, gently brushing his son's hair back. No, buddy. We're finally free. He stood. Folded the manila folder. Slipped his arm around his son's shoulder. As they walked toward the door, every eye followed them, shocked, silent, helpless. Jude reached for the doorknob. Then he heard it. Knox's voice, soft but strong. I'm glad you're my dad. Jude paused. Something in his chest broke and healed all at once. He nodded once, without turning back. And with that, they stepped into the night, father and son, out of the shadows, and into something that finally felt like peace. The courtroom wasn't grand. No marble floors, no sweeping staircases. Just polished wood, the faint hum of flickering fluorescent lights, and an American flag drooping behind the judge's bench. But to Jude, it might as well have been a cathedral. Not of prayer, but of reckoning. Case number 22 FM 1031, the clerk announced. State of Massachusetts versus Victor Wilder and Emily Foster, on counts of identity theft, financial fraud, and misappropriation of funds. Jude sat at the front bench, his attorney beside him. Knox, too young to testify, sat in the hallway with a court-appointed advocate, drawing dinosaurs on a notepad. But his presence filled the room. His name was on every document. His future was on trial. Victor sat to the left, in a navy suit that suddenly looked too large on him. His hands, once so commanding, now trembled on the desk. Emily sat beside him, cheeks pale, hair pulled tight, eyes darting between the prosecutor and the defense like a cornered animal. The judge, a woman in her 60s with no patience for theatrics, adjusted her glasses. Let's proceed. The prosecution wasted no time. They brought out the credit card applications, with Knox's name and social security number printed clearly, the ink barely faded. They showed statements, steak dinners, flights, cigars, a golf resort in Scottsdale. The room listened as the investigator spoke. The victim was 8 years old. He had no knowledge of the cards. No ability to consent. The adult in question, his grandfather, used his position of trust to exploit the child's financial identity. Emily's crimes came next. A forensic accountant displayed the transaction trail, withdrawals labeled Knox's education fund, rerouted into a personal checking account, then quickly dispersed through Airbnb bookings, boutique clothing purchases, and an invoice from a photographer titled Sunset Couple Package Tulum. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Emily leaned forward, whispering to her attorney, eyes wide with desperation. The prosecutor didn't stop. This wasn't just theft, she said, turning toward the judge. It was betrayal. Of a child. Of a family. And it was done by those who should have been his protectors. When the defense finally spoke, their words landed with the weight of wet paper. Your Honor, my clients admit to misjudgment, but this was a misunderstanding, not malice. Jude stood. Calm. Clear. A misunderstanding doesn't show up in 6 months of credit reports. The judge nodded. Mr. Wilder, as the plaintiff, do you have a closing statement? Jude looked at Victor. You taught me that family meant loyalty. But loyalty without respect is just control. You used my son. You used all of us. 4 decades. Today, that ends. Then, he turned to Emily. She looked away, eyes glassy. I loved you like the sister I remember. But you looked at Knox's future, and saw a beach vacation. I don't know who you are anymore. He paused. Then added, simply. Do whatever you want with your lives. But leave ours alone. The judge leaned forward. This court finds Victor Wilder guilty on 2 counts of identity fraud and financial abuse of a minor. Emily Foster is found guilty of misappropriation of protected funds. Both are hereby fined, and restitution will be paid in full to the trust of Knox Wilder within 60 days. Bang. The gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. The name Wilder, once whispered with reverence in their tight-knit community, was now tied to headlines that read, Grandfather guilty of stealing from grandson. Family implodes over hidden financial crimes. By week's end, Victor had been removed from the church board. Emily's PTA position was quietly revoked. Jason stopped showing up to neighborhood cookouts. Elaine retreated into silence. The fund for Knox's education. Secure. Untouchable. Transferred to a new institution with Jude as sole trustee. Jude didn't smile as he signed the final papers. But he felt something deeper than satisfaction. Peace. A quiet, powerful kind. It was late. The kind of late where the world feels like it's holding its breath. Rain tapped gently against the window, and the only light in the room came from a single lamp, casting soft shadows across Jude's desk. His phone lit up. Unknown caller. He let it ring 4 times. Then answered. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Shaky breath. Then. Jude. Victor's voice was weaker than he remembered. Gravelly. Fragile. It sounded like it came from a hospital bed with wires and beeping monitors close by. Jude didn't say anything. I don't know how to begin, Victor rasped. I've been thinking about you. About Knox. Silence. I was wrong. His voice cracked. I see that now. Everything I thought was strength. It was fear. And ego. I hurt you. I hurt him. I don't expect you to forgive me, but... Jude finally spoke. Then don't ask me to. Victor's breath caught. Please, son. I'm dying. Jude's eyes stung, but he didn't let it show. You've been killing pieces of this family for years. You don't get to play the victim now. I wanted to make you tough. I didn't know another way. Jude's tone sharpened. There were other ways. You just didn't care enough to try them. There was a long pause. A silence so deep it seemed to pull the whole world into it. Then Jude said, softly but clearly. Knox said something the night we walked out. Victor said nothing. Jude repeated it anyway. Bad grandpas don't have grandsons anymore. The line hung in the air, bitter and irreversible. He's right, Jude added. You don't. A stifled breath. Maybe a sob. Maybe just the sound of an old man finally realizing he was truly alone. Jude didn't wait for more. He ended the call. Set the phone down gently. Let the silence settle back over the room. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the truth had finally finished speaking. The new house was small. 2 bedrooms. A narrow kitchen. Wooden floors that creaked in a few places. No fireplace. No chandelier. Just a porch with chipped paint, a garden overrun with clover, and a mailbox Jude still hadn't gotten around to fixing. But it was home. There were no ghosts in the walls. No sharp-tongued voices at dinner. No hidden debts, no fake smiles stretched thin across family portraits. Just the sound of Knox's laughter bouncing down the hallway, and the smell of grilled cheese burning slightly on the stove. Jude stood in the doorway of Knox's room, watching him place tiny dinosaur figurines across a map of Mars taped to the wall. "Careful with the Stegosaurus, buddy," Jude said. "He's not built for space travel." Knox giggled. "He's the commander." Jude smiled, leaned against the doorframe. Sunlight spilled through the curtains. The kind of light that felt clean. Earned. Knox paused. He looked up. Thought for a moment. "I miss them sometimes," he said softly. Jude's smile faded a bit, but he stayed calm. "That's okay." Knox turned back to his map. Then said, quieter. "But I'm happy it's just us." Jude swallowed hard. Walked over. Sat beside him on the floor. He didn't need to say anything. He just sat there, cross-legged in a room painted light blue, beside a boy who still believed in dinosaurs and second chances. And for the first time in a very long time, Jude didn't feel like a failure. Not a disappointment. Not the soft one, or the son who never measured up. He was a father. The kind who showed up. Who listened. Who chose kindness over power. And when Knox leaned his head against his shoulder, Jude let his eyes close, just for a moment. The storm had passed. And in its place, peace. Family is supposed to mean safety. Love. Warmth. A place to return to, not escape from. But for Jude, and for so many like him, family had become a quiet battlefield. A place where pain was passed down like heirlooms, wrapped in tradition and sealed with silence. He broke that cycle. Not with rage. Not with revenge. But with truth. Because sometimes, the most courageous thing a person can do isn't forgiving. It's refusing to pretend anymore. Refusing to smile through the damage. Refusing to teach their child that pain is the price of belonging. And choosing, instead, to say, enough. Not just for himself, but for the little boy watching. And for the man he chose to become. Because family should never be a cage. And love should never come with bruises, seen or unseen. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not out of anger, but out of love. For your child. For yourself. For the peace you were always told you didn't deserve.